Animation is a filmmaking technique whereby still images are manipulated to create moving images. In traditional animation, images are drawn or painted by hand on transparent celluloid sheets to be photographed and exhibited on film. Animation has been recognized as an artistic medium, specifically within the entertainment industry. Many animations are either traditional animations or computer animations made with computer-generated imagery, CGI. Stop-motion animation, in particular claymation, has continued to exist alongside these other forms. Animation is contrasted with live action, although the two do not exist in isolation. Many movie makers have produced films that are a hybrid of the two. As CGI increasingly approximates photographic imagery, filmmakers can easily composite 3D animations into their film rather than using practical effects for showy visual effects, VFX. Computer animation can be very detailed 3D animation, while 2D computer animation, which may have the look of traditional animation, can be used for stylistic reasons, low bandwidth, or faster real-time renderings. Other common animation methods apply a stop-motion technique to 2- and 3-dimensional objects like paper cutouts, puppets, or clay figures. An animated cartoon, or simply a cartoon, is an animated film, usually short, that features an exaggerated visual style. This style is often inspired by comic strips, gag cartoons, and other non-animated art forms. Cartoons frequently include anthropomorphic animals, superheroes, or the adventures of human protagonists. The action often revolves around exaggerated physical humor, particularly in predator-slash-prey dynamics, e.g. cats and mice, coyotes, and birds, where violent pratfalls such as falls, collisions, and explosions occur, often in ways that would be lethal in the real life. During the 1980s, the term cartoon was shortened to toon, referring to characters in animated productions, or more specifically, cartoonishly drawn characters. This term gained popularity first in 1988 with the live-action/animated hybrid film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which introduced Toontown, a world inhabited by various animated cartoon characters. In 1990, Tiny Toon Adventures embraced the classic cartoon spirit, introducing a new generation of cartoon characters. Then, in 1993, Animaniacs followed, featuring the Rubber Hose-styled Warner siblings, Yakko Warner, Wakko Warner, and Dot Warner, who are trapped in the 1930s, eventually escaped and found themselves in the Warner Brothers water tower in the 1990s. The illusion of animation as in motion pictures in general has traditionally been attributed to the persistence of vision and later to the phi phenomenon and beta movement, but the exact neurological causes are still uncertain. The illusion of motion caused by a rapid succession of images that minimally differ from each other, with unnoticeable interruptions, is a stroboscopic effect. While animators traditionally used to draw each part of the movements and changes of figures on transparent cells that could be moved over a separate background, computer animation is usually based on programming paths between keyframes to maneuver digitally created figures throughout a digitally created environment. Analog mechanical animation media that rely on the rapid display of sequential images include the phenakistoscope, zoetrope, flipbook, praxinoscope, and film. Television and video are popular electronic animation media that originally were analog and now operate digitally. For display on computers, technologies such as the animated GIF and flash animation were developed. In addition to short films, feature films, television series, animated GIFs, and other media dedicated to the display of moving images, animation is also prevalent in video games, motion graphics, user interfaces, and visual effects. The physical movement of image parts through simple mechanics, for instance, moving images in magic lantern shows, can also be considered animation. The mechanical manipulation of three-dimensional puppets and objects to emulate living beings has a very long history in automata. Electronic automata were popularized by Disney as animatronics. Long before modern animation began, audiences around the world were captivated by the magic of moving characters. For centuries, master artists and craftsmen have brought puppets, automatons, shadow puppets, and fantastical lanterns to life, inspiring the imagination through physically manipulated wonders. In 1833, the stroboscopic disc, better known as the phenakistoscope, introduced the principle of modern animation, which would also be applied in the zoetrope, introduced in 1866, the flip book, 1868, the praxinoscope, 1877, and film. When cinematography eventually broke through in the 1890s, the wonder of the realistic details in the new medium was seen as its biggest accomplishment. It took years before animation found its way to the cinemas. The successful short The Haunted Hotel, 1907, by J. Stuart Blackton popularized stop-motion and reportedly inspired Émile Cohl to create Phantasmagorie, 1908, regarded as the oldest known example of a complete traditional, hand-drawn, animation on standard cinematographic film. Other great artistic and very influential short films were created by Lottie Sla Starovic with his puppet animations since 1910 and by Winsor McKay with detailed hand-drawn animation in films such as Little Nemo, 1911, and Gertie the Dinosaur, 1914. During the 1910s, the production of animated cartoons became an industry in the U.S. Successful producer John Randolph Bray and animator Earl Hurd patented the cell animation process that dominated the animation industry for the rest of the century. Felix the Cat, who debuted in 1919, became the first fully realized anthropomorphic animal character in the history of American animation. Duration, 4 minutes and 15 seconds. 4:15 Subtitles available. CC Feline Follies with Felix the Cat, Silent, 1919. In 1928, Steamboat Willie, featuring Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, popularized film with synchronized sound and put Walt Disney's studio at the forefront of the animation industry. Although Disney Animation's actual output relative to total global animation output has always been very small, the studio has overwhelmingly dominated the aesthetic norms of animation ever since. The enormous success of Mickey Mouse is seen as the start of the golden age of American animation that would last until the 1960s. The United States dominated the world market of animation with a plethora of cel-animated theatrical shorts. Several studios would introduce characters that would become very popular and would have long-lasting careers, including Walt Disney Productions' Goofy, 1932, and Donald Duck, 1934, Fleischer Studios/Paramount Cartoon Studios Out of the Inkwell Coco the Clown, 1918, Bimbo and Betty Boop, 1930, Popeye, 1933, and Casper the Friendly Ghost, 1945, Warner Brothers. Cartoon Studios Looney Tunes Porky Pig, 1935, Daffy Duck, 1937, Elmer Fudd, 1937-1940, Bugs Bunny, 1938-1940, Tweety, 1942, Sylvester the Cat, 1945, Wile E. Coyote and the Road Runner, 1949, MGM Cartoon Studios Tom and Jerry, 1940, and Droopy, Universal Cartoon Studios Woody Woodpecker, 1940, Terrytoons/20th Century Fox's Mighty Mouse, 1942, and United Artists Pink Panther, 1963. In 1917, Italian-Argentine director Quirino Cristiani made the first feature-length film El Apostol, Now Lost, which became a critical and commercial success. It was followed by Cristiani's Sin di Rastros in 1918, but one day after its premiere, the film was confiscated by the government. After working on it for 3 years, Lotte Reiniger released the German feature-length silhouette animation Die Abentur de Prinzen Ahmed in 1926, the oldest extant animated feature. In 1937, Walt Disney Studios premiered their first animated feature Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, still one of the highest-grossing traditional animation features as of May 2020. The Fleischer Studios followed this example in 1939 with Gulliver's Travels with some success. Partly due to foreign markets being cut off by the Second World War, Disney's next features Pinocchio, Fantasia, both 1940, Fleischer Studios' second animated feature Mr. Bug Goes to Town, 1941 to 1942, and Disney's feature film Cinderella, 1950, Alice in Wonderland, 1951, and Lady and the Tramp, 1955, failed at the box office. For several decades, Disney was the only American studio to regularly produce animated features, until Ralph Bakshi became the first to release more than a handful of features. Sullivan Bluth Studios began to regularly produce animated features starting with An American Tail in 1986. Although relatively few titles became as successful as Disney's features, other countries developed their own animation industries that produced both short and feature theatrical animations in a wide variety of styles, relatively often including stop-motion and cutout animation techniques. Soviet Soyuzmultfilm Animation Studio, founded in 1936, produced 20 films, including shorts, per year on average and reached 1,582 titles in 2018. China, Czechoslovakia/Czech Republic, Italy, France, and Belgium were other countries that more than occasionally released feature films. Animation became very popular on television since the 1950s, when television sets started to become common in most developed countries. Cartoons were mainly programmed for children, on convenient time slots, and especially U.S. youth spent many hours watching Saturday morning cartoons. Many classic cartoons found a new life on the small screen, and by the end of the 1950s, the production of new animated cartoons started to shift from theatrical releases to TV series. Hanna-Barbera Productions was especially prolific and had huge hit series, such as The Flintstones, 1960 to 1966, the first prime-time animated series, Scooby-Doo, since 1969, and Belgian co-production The Smurfs, 1981 to 1989. The constraints of American television programming and the demand for an enormous quantity resulted in cheaper and quicker limited animation methods and much more formulaic scripts. Quality dwindled until more daring animation surfaced in the late 1980s and in the early 1990s with hit series, the first cartoon of The Simpsons, 1987, which later developed into its own show, in 1989, and SpongeBob SquarePants, since 1999, as part of a renaissance of American animation. While U.S. animated series also spawned successes internationally, many other countries produced their own child-oriented programming, relatively often preferring stop-motion and puppetry over cell animation. Japanese anime TV series became very successful internationally since the 1960s, and European producers looking for affordable cell animators relatively often started co-productions with Japanese studios, resulting in hit series such as Barbapapa, the Netherlands/Japan/France 1973 to 1977, Wiki und die Starken Männer / Vicky the Viking, Austria/Germany/Japan 1974, Maya the Honeybee, Japan/Germany 1975, and The Jungle Book, Italy/Japan 1989. Computer animation was gradually developed since the 1940s. 3D wireframe animation started popping up in the mainstream in the 1970s, with an early, short, appearance in the sci-fi thriller Future World, 1976. The Rescuers Down Under was the first feature film to be completely created digitally without a camera. It was produced using the Computer Animation Production System, CAPS, developed by Pixar in collaboration with the Walt Disney Company in the late 1980s, in a style similar to traditional cell animation. The so-called 3D style, more often associated with computer animation, became the dominant technique following the success of Pixar's Toy Story, 1995, the first computer-animated feature in this style. Most of the cell animation studios switched to producing mostly computer-animated films around the 1990s, as it proved cheaper and more profitable. Not only the very popular 3D animation style was generated with computers, but also most of the films and series with a more traditional handcrafted appearance, in which the charming characteristics of cell animation could be emulated with software, while new digital tools helped developing new styles and effects. In 2010, The animation market was estimated to be worth circa $80 billion. By 2021, the value had increased to an estimated $370 billion. Animated feature-length films returned the highest gross margins, around 52%, of all film genres between 2004 and 2013. Animation as an art and industry continues to thrive as of the early 2020s. The clarity of animation makes it a powerful tool for instruction, while its total malleability also allows exaggeration that can be employed to convey strong emotions and to thwart reality. It has therefore been widely used for other purposes than mere entertainment. During World War II, animation was widely exploited for propaganda. Many American studios, including Warner Brothers and Disney, lent their talents and their cartoon characters to convey to the public certain war values. These efforts extended to other countries well into the Cold War era, particularly as it pertained to combating communism. For example, the English 1954 adaptation of George Orwell's Animal Farm, the nation's first feature-length animated film, is speculated to have had its production funded by the CIA. Animation has been very popular in television commercials, both due to its graphic appeal, and the humor it can provide. Some animated characters in commercials have survived for decades, such as Snap, Crackle and Pop in advertisements for Kellogg's cereals. Tex Avery was the producer of the first Raid Kills Bugs Dead commercials in 1966, which were very successful for the company. Apart from their success in movie theaters and television series, many cartoon characters would also prove lucrative when licensed for all kinds of merchandise and for other media. Animation has traditionally been very closely related to comic books. While many comic book characters found their way to the screen, which is often the case in Japan, where many manga are adapted into anime, original animated characters also commonly appear in comic books and magazines. Somewhat similarly, characters and plots for video games, an interactive form of animation that became its own medium, have been derived from films and vice versa. Some of the original content produced for the screen can be used and marketed in other media. Stories and images can easily be adapted into children's books and other printed media. Songs and music have appeared on records and as streaming media. While very many animation companies commercially exploit their creations outside moving image media, the Walt Disney Company is the best known and most extreme example. Since first being licensed for a children's writing tablet in 1929, their Mickey Mouse mascot has been depicted on an enormous amount of products, as have many other Disney characters. This may have influenced some pejorative use of Mickey's name, but licensed Disney products sell well, and the so-called Disneyana has many avid collectors, and even a dedicated Disneyana fan club, since 1984. Disneyland opened in 1955 and features many attractions that were based on Disney's cartoon characters. Its enormous success spawned several other Disney theme parks and resorts. Disney's earnings from the theme parks have relatively often been higher than those from their movies. As with any other form of media, animation has instituted awards for excellence in the field. Many are part of general or regional film award programs, like the China's Golden Rooster Award for Best Animation, since 1981. Awards programs dedicated to animation, with many categories, include ASIFA Hollywood's Annie Awards, the Emile Awards in Europe and the Anima Mundi Awards in Brazil. Apart from Academy Awards for Best Animated Short Film, since 1932, and Best Animated Feature, since 2002, animated movies have been nominated and rewarded in other categories, relatively often for Best Original Song and Best Original Score. Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film nominated for Best Picture, in 1991. Up, 2009, and Toy Story 3, 2010, also received Best Picture nominations, after the Academy expanded the number of nominees from 5 to 10. The creation of non-trivial animation works, i.e., longer than a few seconds, has developed as a form of filmmaking, with certain unique aspects. Traits common to both live-action and animated feature films are labor intensity and high production costs. The most important difference is that once a film is in the production phase, the marginal cost of one more shot is higher for animated films than live-action films. It is relatively easy for a director to ask for one more take during principal photography of a live-action film, but every take on an animated film must be manually rendered by animators, although the task of rendering slightly different takes has been made less tedious by modern computer animation. It is pointless for a studio to pay the salaries of dozens of animators to spend weeks creating a visually dazzling 5-minute scene if that scene fails to effectively advance the plot of the film. Thus, animation studios starting with Disney began the practice in the 1930s of maintaining story departments where storyboard artists develop every single scene through storyboards, then handing the film over to the animators only after the production team is satisfied that all the scenes make sense as a whole. While live-action films are now also storyboarded, they enjoy more latitude to depart from storyboards, i.e., real-time improvisation. Another problem unique to animation is the requirement to maintain a film's consistency from start to finish, even as films have grown longer and teams have grown larger. Animators, like all artists, necessarily have individual styles, but must subordinate their individuality in a consistent way to whatever style is employed on a particular film. Since the early 1980s, teams of about 500 to 600 people, of whom 50 to 70 are animators, typically have created feature-length animated films. It is relatively easy for 2 or 3 artists to match their styles. Synchronizing those of dozens of artists is more difficult. This problem is usually solved by having a separate group of visual development artists develop an overall look and palette for each film before the animation begins. While animators must sacrifice their personal drawing styles so that the work of many hands appears to be that of one, visual development artists are allowed to create new worlds, new characters, and new entertainment possibilities in their own individualistic graphic styles. Character designers on the visual development team draw model sheets to show how each character should look like with different facial expressions, posed in different positions, and viewed from different angles. On traditionally animated projects, maquettes were often sculpted to further help the animators see how characters would look from different angles. Unlike live-action films, animated films were traditionally developed beyond the synopsis stage through the storyboard format. The storyboard artists would then receive credit for writing the film. The traditional approach worked for several decades because prior to the 1960s, no one except Disney was attempting to regularly produce feature-length animated films. All other animation studios, with occasional exceptions, were producing short films only a few minutes in length. For short films, it was enough for the storyboard artists to work up a few visual gags and then string them together to form a crude plot. In 1960, Hanna-Barbera pioneered the longer animated sitcom format for television with the Flintstones. Hanna-Barbera and the other early television animation studios soon discovered that storyboarding was far too inefficient to fill up a half-hour episode on the extremely tight budgets typical of television. During the 1960s, these studios experimented with a more efficient method for developing story material. A screenwriter is hired to draft a written screenplay which is approved and handed over to the storyboard artists for storyboarding. This method creates significant tension between screenwriters and storyboard artists, in that some artists feel that people who cannot draw should not be writing for animation, while some writers feel that artists do not understand how to write. Despite that tension, it has become and remains the dominant method by which animation studios develop both feature-length films and television shows. Ironically, the Disney studio was relatively slow to adopt this method. The first Disney feature animated film to have a complete screenplay written and approved before storyboarding was 101 Dalmatians, 1961. However, 101 Dalmatians was a short-lived experiment. The next Disney film to follow this method was The Great Mouse Detective, 1986. Finally, another key difference is that actors traditionally record vocal tracks for animated films in separate individual sessions. Actors usually schedule sessions in the recording studio around their live-action work. In live-action filmmaking, it is very common for actors to drop out of projects due to scheduling conflicts, while in animation, recording actors separately makes it possible to get a lot more stars into one movie than would be possible if those actors needed to be physically present on the same set at the same time. Traditional animation, also called cell animation or hand-drawn animation, is the process that was used for most animated films of the 20th century. The individual frames of a traditionally animated film are photographs of drawings, first drawn on paper. To create the illusion of movement, each drawing differs slightly from the one before it. The animator's drawings are traced or photocopied onto transparent acetate sheets called cells, which are filled in with paints in assigned colors or tones on the side opposite the line drawings. The completed character cells are photographed one by one against a painted background by a rostrum camera onto motion picture film. The traditional cell animation process became obsolete by the beginning of the 21st century. In modern traditionally animated films, animators' drawings and the backgrounds are either scanned into or drawn directly into a computer system. Various software programs are used to color the drawings and simulate camera movement and effects. The final animated piece is output to one of several delivery media, including traditional 35mm film and newer media with digital video. The look of traditional cell animation is still preserved, and the character animator's work has remained essentially the same over the past 90 years. Some animation producers have used the term tradigital, a play on the words traditional and digital, to describe cell animation that uses significant computer technology. Examples of traditionally animated feature films include Pinocchio, United States, 1940, Animal Farm, United Kingdom, 1954, Lucky and Zorba, Italy, 1998, and The Illusionist, British-French, 2010. Traditionally animated films produced with the aid of computer technology include The Lion King, U.S., 1994, Anastasia, U.S., 1997, The Prince of Egypt, U.S., 1998, Akira, Japan, 1988, Spirited Away, Japan, 2001, The Triplets of Belleville, France, 2003, and The Secret of Kells, Irish-French-Belgian, 2009. Full animation is the process of producing high-quality traditionally animated films that regularly use detailed drawings and plausible movement, having a smooth animation. Fully animated films can be made in a variety of styles, from more realistically animated works like those produced by the Walt Disney Studio, The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, to the more cartoon styles of the Warner Brothers Animation Studio. Many of the Disney animated features are examples of full animation, as are non-Disney works, The Secret of NIMH, U.S., 1982, The Iron Giant, U.S., 1999, and Nocturna, Spain, 2007. Fully animated films are often animated on twos, sometimes on ones, which means that 12 to 24 drawings are required for a single second of film. Limited animation involves the use of less detailed or more stylized drawings and methods of movement, usually a choppy or skippy movement animation. Limited animation uses fewer drawings per second, thereby limiting the fluidity of the animation. This is a more economic technique. Pioneered by the artists at the American studio United Productions of America, limited animation can be used as a method of stylized artistic expression, as in Gerald Boing Boing, U.S., 1951, Yellow Submarine, UK, 1968, and certain anime produced in Japan. Its primary use, however, has been in producing cost-effective animated content for media for television, the work of Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, and other TV animation studios, and later the Internet, web cartoons. Rotoscoping is a technique patented by Max Fleischer in 1917 where animators trace live-action movement, frame by frame. The source film can be directly copied from actors' outlines into animated drawings, as in The Lord of the Rings, U.S., 1978, or used in a stylized and expressive manner, as in Waking Life, U.S., 2001, and A Scanner Darkly, U.S., 2006. Some other examples are Fire and Ice, U.S., 1983, Heavy Metal, 1981, and Aku no Hana, Japan, 2013. Live-action/animation is a technique combining hand-drawn characters into live-action shots or live-action actors into animated shots. One of the earlier uses was in Coco the Clown when Coco was drawn over live-action footage. Walt Disney and UB Works created a series of Alice comedies, 1923 to 1927, in which a live-action girl enters an animated world. Other examples include Allegro non troppo, Italy, 1976, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, U.S., 1988, Volare Volare, Italy 1991, Space Jam, U.S., 1996, and Osmosis Jones, U.S., 2001. Stop motion is used to describe animation created by physically manipulating real-world objects and photographing them one frame of film at a time to create the illusion of movement. There are many different types of stop-motion animation, usually named after the materials used to create the animation. Computer software is widely available to create this type of animation. Traditional stop-motion animation is usually less expensive but more time-consuming to produce than current computer animation. Stop motion typically involves stop-motion puppet figures interacting in a constructed environment, in contrast to real-world interaction in model animation. The puppets generally have an armature inside of them to keep them still and steady to constrain their motion to particular joints. Examples include The Tale of the Fox, France, 1937, The Nightmare Before Christmas, U.S., 1993, Corpse Bride, U.S., 2005, Coraline, U.S., 2009, the films of Yuri Trnka and the adult animated sketch comedy television series Robot Chicken, U.S., 2005, present. Puppetoons. Created using techniques developed by George Pal, are puppet animated films that typically use a different version of a puppet for different frames, rather than manipulating one existing puppet. Clay animation or plasticine animation. Often called claymation, which, however, is a trademarked name. It uses figures made of clay or a similar malleable material to create stop-motion animation. The figures may have an armature or wire frame inside, similar to the related puppet animation, below, that can be manipulated to pose the figures. Alternatively, the figures may be made entirely of clay, in the films of Bruce Bickford, where clay creatures morph into a variety of different shapes. Examples of clay animated works include The Gumby Show, U.S., 1957 to 1967, Mio Mao, Italy, 1974 to 2005, Morph Shorts, UK, 1977 to 2000, Wallace and Gromit Shorts, UK, as of 1989, Jan Svankmajer's Dimensions of Dialogue, Czechoslovakia, 1982, The Trapdoor, UK, 1984. Films include Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Chicken Run and The Adventures of Mark Twain. Most commonly a form of clay animation in which a long bread-like loaf of clay, internally packed tight and loaded with varying imagery, is sliced into thin sheets, with the animation camera taking a frame of the end of the loaf for each cut, eventually revealing the movement of the internal images within. A type of stop-motion animation produced by moving two-dimensional pieces of material, paper or cloth. Examples include Terry Gilliam's animated sequences from Monty Python's Flying Circus, UK, 1969 to 1974, Fantastic Planet, France/Czechoslovakia, 1973, Tale of Tales, Russia, 1979, Matt Stone and Trey Parker The First Cutout Animation South Park, 1992, the pilot episode of the adult television sitcom series, and sometimes in episodes, of South Park, U.S., 1997, and the music video Live for the Moment, from Verona Riots Band, produced by Alberto Serrano and Nivola Ulla, Spain 2014. A variant of cutout animation in which the characters are backlit and only visible as silhouettes. Examples include The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, Weimar Republic, 1926, and Princes et Princesses, France, 2000. Stop-motion animation created to interact with and exist as a part of a live-action world. Intercutting, matte effects and split screens are often employed to blend stop-motion characters or objects with live actors and settings. Examples include the work of Ray Harryhausen, as seen in films Jason and the Argonauts, 1963, and the work of Willis H. O'Brien on films King Kong, 1933. Go motion. A variant of model animation that uses various techniques to create motion blur between frames of film, which is not present in traditional stop motion. The technique was invented by Industrial Light and Magic and Phil Tippett to create special effects scenes for the film Star Wars, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 1980. Another example is the dragon named Vermithrax from the 1981 film Dragon Slayer. Object animation. The use of regular inanimate objects in stop-motion animation, as opposed to specially created items. Graphic animation. Uses non-drawn flat visual graphic material, photographs, newspaper clippings, magazines, etc., which are sometimes manipulated frame by frame to create movement. At other times, the graphics remain stationary, while the stop-motion camera is moved to create on-screen action. Brick film. A subgenre of object animation involving using Lego or other similar brick toys to make an animation. These have had a recent boost in popularity with the advent of video sharing sites, YouTube, and the availability of cheap cameras and animation software. Pixelation. Involves the use of live humans as stop-motion characters. This allows for a number of surreal effects, including disappearances and reappearances, allowing people to appear to slide across the ground, and other effects. Examples of pixelation include The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb and Angry Kid shorts, and the Academy Award-winning Neighbors by Norman McLaren. Computer animation encompasses a variety of techniques, the unifying factor being that the animation is created digitally on a computer. 2D animation techniques tend to focus on image manipulation, while 3D techniques usually build virtual worlds in which characters and objects move and interact. 3D animation can create images that seem real to the viewer. 2D animation figures are created or edited on the computer using 2D bitmap graphics and 2D vector graphics. This includes automated computerized versions of traditional animation techniques, interpolated morphing, onion skinning and interpolated rotoscoping. 2D animation has many applications, including After Effects animation, analog computer animation, flash animation, and PowerPoint animation. Cinemagraphs are still photographs in the form of an animated GIF file of which part is animated. Final line advection animation is a technique used in 2D animation, to give artists and animators more influence and control over the final product, as everything is done within the same department. Speaking about using this approach in Paperman, John Carr said that our animators can change things, actually erase away the CG underlayer if they want, and change the profile of the arm. When working with game animations, skeletal 2D animations are commonly created using tools like Spine, Dragon Bones, Blender COA tools, Rive, and the built-in Unity editor. The primary benefit of this approach is the ability to reuse images, which reduces the amount of graphics stored in RAM. This principle of maximizing resource efficiency means that by reusing existing elements, you can enhance the visual appeal of animations without needing to create additional graphics. 3D animation is digitally modeled and manipulated by an animator. The 3D model maker usually starts by creating a 3D polygon mesh for the animator to manipulate. A mesh typically includes many vertices that are connected by edges and faces, which give the visual appearance of form to a 3D object or 3D environment. Sometimes, the the mesh is given an internal digital skeletal structure called an armature that can be used to control the mesh by weighting the vertices. This process is called rigging and can be used in conjunction with keyframes to create movement. Other techniques can be applied: mathematical functions, example gravity, particle simulations, simulated fur or hair, and effects, fire and water simulations. These techniques fall under the category of 3D dynamics. Terms: cell shading is used to mimic traditional animation using computer software. The shading looks stark, with less blending of colors. Examples include Skyland, 2007, France, The Iron Giant, 1999, US, Futurama, 1999, US. Appleseed Ex Machina, 2007, Japan, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker, 2002, Japan, The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, 2017, Japan. Machinima, films created by screen capturing in video games and virtual worlds. The term originated from the software introduction in the 1980s demo scene, as well as the 1990s recordings of the first-person shooter video game Quake. Motion capture is used when live-action actors wear special suits that allow computers to copy their movements into CG characters. Examples include Polar Express, 2004, US, Beowulf, 2007, US, A Christmas Carol, 2009, US, The Adventures of Tintin, 2011, US, Kochadiayan, 2014, India. Computer animation is used primarily for animation that attempts to resemble real life while having a stylized cartoonish appearance, using advanced rendering that mimics in detail skin, plants, water, fire, clouds, etc. Examples include Up, 2009, US, How to Train Your Dragon, 2010, US. Physically based animation is animation using computer simulations. Mechanical animatronics is the use of mechatronics to create machines that seem animate rather than robotic. Audio animatronics is a form of robotics animation, combined with 3D animation, created by Walt Disney Imagineering for shows and attractions at Disney theme parks. Move and make noise, generally a recorded speech or song. They are fixed to whatever supports them. They can sit and stand, and they cannot walk. An audio animatron is different from an android-type robot in that it uses pre-recorded movements and sounds, rather than responding to external stimuli. In 2009, Disney created an interactive version of the technology called autonomatronics. Linear animation generator is a form of animation by using static picture frames installed in a tunnel or a shaft. The animation illusion is created by putting the viewer in a linear motion, parallel to the installed picture frames. Claymation is a type of animation created by the makers of the television series Action League Now, in which characters/props are thrown, or chucked from off-camera or wiggled around to simulate talking by unseen hands. The Magic Lantern used mechanical slides to project moving images. Christian Huygens was thought to have invented the magic lantern in the mid-1600s. Other musical fountain, a hydrotechnical show that includes water and lights, nowadays often combined with lasers and high-definition projections on mist screens. Drawn-on film animation, a technique where footage is produced by creating the images directly on film stock, for example, by Norman McLaren, Len Lai, and Stan Brackhag. Paint-on-glass animation, a technique for making animated films by manipulating slow-drying oil paints on sheets of glass, for example by Alexander Petrov. Erasure animation, a technique using traditional 2D media, photographed over time as the artist manipulates the image. For example, William Kentridge is famous for his charcoal erasure films and Piotr Dumala for his auteur technique of animating scratches on plaster. Pin screen animation makes use of a screen filled with movable pins that can be moved in or out by pressing an object onto the screen. The screen is lit from the side so that the pins cast shadows. The technique has been used to create animated films with a range of textural effects difficult to achieve with traditional cell animation. Sand animation. Sand is moved around on a back or front lighted piece of glass to create each frame for an animated film. This creates an interesting effect when animated because of the light contrast. Flip book. A flip book, sometimes, especially in British English, called a flick book, is a book with a series of pictures that vary gradually from one page to the next, so that when the pages are turned rapidly, the pictures appear to animate by simulating motion or some other change. Flip books are often illustrated books for children. They also are geared towards adults and employ a series of photographs rather than drawings. Flip books are not always separate books, they appear as an added feature in ordinary books or magazines, often in the page corners. Software packages and websites are also available that convert digital video files into custom-made flip books. 2.5D animation, a mix of 2D and 3D animation elements that emphasize the illusion of depth utilizing the pseudo-3D effect. During the 1970s, the term 2.5D started to gain recognition. But its background comes from anime and manga during the 1920s, where theatrical stage productions were popular. Stage adaptations of well-liked anime series featured live performances by voice actors called 2.5D. Thank you for watching this video.